I call to order the Committee of the Whole of the Forest Hills Board for November 12th. And since we have no public present, there is no public comment period today, so we can go right into public works. Cecil?
Start with the managers. First of all, thank you, Vice President. We'll go directly to the manager's update.
Mr. Watkins, the update I have, and I don't believe there'll be anything else from the engineer on this, but we are scheduled to open the bids for the STEPS project, as we've been calling it, on December 2nd. And then once the bids are open, and we see what they are, we'll be able to determine the full scope within the bids.
Okay.
And then the goal would be that if everything is acceptable, we would be asking council to award the bid at the December business meeting.
That's fine. Anything else?
All I have.
Okay. Next, we have the engineer's report. If you are ready, Mr. Brett.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Under Public Works.
I think we need microphone closer, please.
How's that? Better? So under the roads, last year's road program has been completed. I did include a few pictures of the before and after for the photographs at the end of the report. Project did close out with a decrease change orders of $75,213.57.
Your hands up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Brett. I just wanted to say how nice those pictures were that you sent, specifically the before and after of Clover Alley. And I hope that all council continues to work looking from the bottom up and going forward with our worst roads. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you. So we did end up with a decrease in that contract, and this will close out the contract. The Ardmore Boulevard storm sewer project, they are progressing. They're about 75% their way up the street. They're hitting very hard rock. Certain days they only get around 20 feet pipe in because the sewer is deep in this section. But they do seem to be coming out of it. They're about 60% done with the work because at the intersection itself, there's a tremendous amount of work, very concentrated area with a lot of pipes. Next is the grants. We did send over cost estimate for the PRP as well as the consent order project, and Maureen is putting together the rest of the grants on information on those. So last item is the various projects at the lodge, down to a few minor punch list items on construction. So those projects have been completed. So any questions on our report? Yes.
Yes. Assuming we receive bids, we open them and we award them. Can I assume correctly that you will start in spring with that work? We're probably not starting right away.
Yeah, we have the bids opening in December, as indicated on the 2nd. I have the plans here actually this evening, full set. I'm going to give to Seth so he can take a look at those. The contracts would be executed in December, and depending on how the winter is, last year we did have folks build in February and March. So it really depends on how the weather is. Steps especially, they can pour and cover those with blankets. So they may progress throughout the winter. So.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
I take it there are no other questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Brett. We would have the foreman's report. However, he's not here. his report is contained in our agenda. So do you have questions, Mr. Bacon?
Maybe Mr. Abrams can answer this. For patching Windsor, I was just wondering which block that is, if it's the 600 one that is closest to Westinghouse, or if it's 500 between Marion and Lennox.
That I'm not sure. I can get back to you if you'd like, though.
Any other questions from the foreman's report? That concludes everything for Public Works. There is no new business, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Next, we have Borough Property, Mr. Bacon.
Thank you. May we have the manager's update, please?
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. The solar is up and running on all of the sites now, and I have visibility and generation reports for everything except for the fire department, which we're waiting for Duquesne Light to replace the meter on that. And I'm also working with Duquesne Light to ensure that we're getting our full credit for net metering, working through that. Sites are set up for the aggregation and the sale of the energy credits. Those are going to be quarterly and based on the market value at the time. And then, as Mr. Brett stated, the Westinghouse Lodge, a couple of punch items there, just so council's aware, there is still about $75,000 of outstanding funds, which is the retainage from the various contractors until we sign off on the punch list.
Thank you. For Recreation Board items, Mr. DeCrosta and I attended the Rec Board meeting in October. And we just put out the idea of them coming up with some more details on a comprehensive long-term strategy for revitalizing the main park and choosing playground equipment so that that can be done in a multiple year, multiple segment process and have them take some long-term ownership and guidance of that. Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. DeCrosta? And I believe, Mr. Brett, did you cover everything in the previous report?
Yeah, and there's, as indicated by the manager, just a few punch list items left. So we're following up on those this week. So.
Thank you. For the Green Shrub Committee, one small bit of sad news, which is that a large pin oak on Barclay was one of our first trees to be identified as having oak wilt. So that is now removed to hopefully contain that. And I would ask that maybe someone from the grant committee give us the good news. President Martin, perhaps?
I'd like to. Actually, I'd be very happy to let everybody know that we received notice today from the state that our grant for both the tree inventory and high hazard tree management in our main park has been awarded. We got the full amount. There is a 20% match. But just for those that weren't familiar, it's a borough-wide inventory and community forest management plan, as well as a high hazard and invasive tree management within the main park. We got $160,500, and we already are working with the arborist on this, but I think the good news is it will help Mr. Abrams with future planning on trees, and we really needed just to get a base list of where we're at. So that's the good news. Thank you.
Thank you, President Martin, and everyone involved with that grant process. And that concludes anything for tree and shrub. I have an item on the agenda that is kind of tenuously under borough property. And if council would open to the map in the next page. This is something that I know Braddock Hills is currently very concerned about. There are several residents from there and Forest Hills who provided feedback to Pittsburgh Rapid Transit for some line redesign concerns. And what this particularly affects for Forest Hills is that the P68 bus route, which is the only route that serves Brinton Road, is currently slated to be decommissioned and just gone in the redesign of all the bus lines. I think this strongly affects a lot of our residents along Brinton and that area for their transit needs. And I was wondering perhaps from a legal perspective, what sort of options we might have as a borough to officially express some sort of support for maintaining bus service along Brinton.
I don't know that it would necessarily be legal options, but I do think that it's important that the borough voice that concern to the city, so that they're aware. I can talk with Steve and see if there's something with more teeth, but I don't think that there would necessarily be legal options.
Probably looking at a letter or a resolution stating the borough's view.
I think the resolution is about what I was assuming we were going to aim towards. And I'd be happy to discuss this in detail. I'm sure if we advertise our desire to have some sort of decision on this, we'll have citizens showing up to speak. Is anyone opposed to having a resolution that we address in the next?
I think we
meeting?
should ask Anna and Steve to prepare one for the business meeting.
Okay.
Put it on the agenda for property, I guess.
Like I said, I think it's tenuously in borough property. I'd be happy for it
I
to be
know,
anywhere.
but since it started here, I
Yeah.
think it should stay.
Okay, thank you. That concludes borough property.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. Next, we have public safety. The Bayoku.
Thank you. Unless there's an update from Mr. Abrams, I see there's nothing on the agenda.
That is correct.
We'll move on to the chief's report. We already have the police and fire reports attached, but Chief Williams, have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bioki. I just wanted to mention that we completed the sergeant's testing process. We have 2 candidates that can be moved into the supervisor role. As I said, everything is completed now. So if you choose to, you could actually do this at this particular meeting that's coming up on the 20th. Again, that is your choice to make that decision if you'd like to do that then. But again, I can tell you that civil service has come and had their meeting with me, approved that and certified the list. So we're completed with all the steps that needed to be done to move forward. That's all I have.
I would like to recommend that that item be placed on the agenda for the council meeting to approve the promotion of those officers to sergeant.
How does this affect our budget moving forward?
2024, it will add approximately $1,500 in cost, which is negligible. And for 2025, it's already in the budget. It's about $10,000 per officer.
Okay, and we've already factored that in.
Yes.
Anyone else? No. Okay, thank you. Moving on, first item I have here is a note about the application process and policy for speed humps. I provided both a policy and an application last month for speed humps. The policy I just sent out today. I wasn't expecting any discussion on this, and we still have some discussion that I have to have with Mr. Abrams regarding this, but I just wanted to make sure this was on the committee agenda, and we'll continue to move forward with this. Mr. Watkins.
You said that the policy and procedures were sent out. How were they sent out?
Sent by email,
By email? To
all the council members. That went out this afternoon.
just today?
Just the policy, the other was sent out previously. Okay. No, I wanted to have a discussion and then once
I
we, of
just know that he'll want to review. them
Yes,
to
of
Make
course.
sure they're PennDOT compliant.
course. Bacon.
One question on that. I noticed part of it was to get a petition of 60% of the residents on a street in favor. I was just wondering if there was like a particular way that we arrived at that number, if it's just kind of a place to start with.
Recommended by PennDOT.
Okay, thank you.
I think just first glance, I didn't see how we we have those process and then basically residents in street X want a speed hump. But how do we prioritize if we have 2 or 3 applications, but we only have funding for 1 or?
Well, in my envisioning of this, first of all, I didn't intend that it would be, we'd get into the weeds of how that would happen. That's why I sent it out for everybody to kind of think about it and look it over and come up with questions. But that would be determined by probably the traffic study, the road conditions, all those kinds of things would factor into that, and whether it was prioritized because of way of the amount of traffic on a particular road too would have an impact on that. Mr. Abrams, you look like you.
I was just gonna actually support that the policy is designed to be somewhat overarching, so, but it is clear that upon the study, the taking into account for various things such as accidents, that's council's discretion. Of course, there'd be recommendations from public safety, from the engineer, and then it's council discretion if there's multiples. Or even if there's only one, whether or not to move forward.
Watkins.
Do you have an approximate time frame for implementation?
I'd like to see something by the, at least the first or second month of the new year. Possible. Mr. DeCrosta.
I think it might be helpful to design a simple rating system, perhaps based on your criteria. That we could all just, come out with, quantify this process a little more. And this is a 9, this is a 5, this is a 1.
Exactly.
Kind of boil it down.
That's why I didn't want to discuss it this evening.
Yep, we're not there yet.
You're not there yet. Okay. Mr. Bacon.
Wanting to leave a potential door open in the future, should we start to see other options of this. But just something maybe to consider is that we try and leave some potential options for other traffic calming methods. If like engineering or someone comes back in a situation and says something else might be more appropriate, that we don't like totally lock down, names of stuff to like speed humps maybe.
And that's a good point. The one thing about our streets are that we are limited in what we can actually do. So doing road diets on some of these streets are not possible. Adding more stop signs, if you will, to some of the intersections, that's a possibility. But yeah, I mean, everything's open. Anyone else? Okay. Next item, again, not for discussion, but this came up based on some conversations I've had with a resident, actually several residents, about having a public safety meeting that was a community public safety meeting. At this point, I feel that the residents are able to come to the meeting and let their opinions be known. However, it is a one-way conversation. So what I'm suggesting here is exploring the idea of a quarterly community public safety meeting, working with Mr. Abrams. I haven't had a discussion with him yet about this, but having this again on a quarterly basis and inviting the public to come in and express their views. Mr. Bacon.
Strongly in favor. I just wanted to say I'm strongly in favor.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it would help. Next item, again, discussion with several residents about traffic calming. This goes to some of the things you've said, is that we should look at also having a more comprehensive traffic calming program so we actually take proactive measures. One example of that is we did put in speed humps at the park location. So that was a proactive measure. No one asked for them specifically. So again, this would be just something we should continue to look at. I just wanted to put it here so that it will be something that may be a recurring agenda item until we can get something worked out. Next item, Sumner Avenue parking status. I just want to bring that up that it is still under review. We haven't made any firm decisions yet, and we will revisit this at the next meeting. And then finally, an update on the Dunkin' Donuts turn lane. We had for years, we've been talking about problems with the turning on Fillmore. We did finally get a letter back from PennDOT, from the traffic engineer in District 11 back in October. It's the first chance we've gotten to bring this up, but they are going to notify Dunkin' of their responsibilities to control the congestion in their lot, not to block traffic on either Fillmore or Ardmore Boulevard. So that's one part of the questions that we pose to them. They will not approve the turn restrictions on Fillmore, despite what we had previously received as a possibility of closing that off. They stated that their traffic study did not warrant the closure of the median. In the future, there are other alternatives. You can make I forgot what they actually call it, but it's a left turn. You would make a right out. Actually, what people were doing during the construction, they would go to the next intersection and then make a U-turn, but it would be for other non-signalized roads as well. So if we have other intersections that are like that, that's what they would encourage doing upon future road construction, which could be a long time. And then the last item was I asked about the ADA curb ramps that they installed, and I said, why would you put ramps in there? There's no traffic signals. There's no way for people to cross on Route 30 without getting mowed down. So they said, well, they gave me a non-answer here, but they said, well, if you want to put the crosswalks in, you would have to paint them yourselves. That's up to the municipality to do that. But as far as putting any signaling in and all that, we really want to do that. I would not encourage putting in the crosswalks there because it's just going to, signal to people that they can cross there when they really cannot and should not. So for now, we'll just have to let that go. That's an update, but I would like to have this
Yeah.
letter
Just
placed.
related to that Duncan thing, I have a comment.
Yes, but let me finish. I would like to have this letter placed as an exhibit in when we do our council meeting, so it's memorialized there.
Will also be a part of this packet.
Thank you, Mr. Erbeling.
I happened to do the shift at the fire hall polling place, and it's a huge mess. Like there's like a line on Ardmore backed up. Voters couldn't get in or out because it's all blocked. And I think they maybe need to do markings on their parking lot to actually say where the line needs to go or something, because it's all blocked and it's like they block each other and
Yeah.
people
so-
can't get out, people go, it's a mess.
To the letter, they were supposed to be notified by the Highway Occupancy Permit Unit of the engineering.
It's like every day, basically, so.
But either they haven't received it or they aren't doing anything about it.
Or honestly, like everything else with the state, they are being given a certain amount of time to come into compliance, and we are going to have to play a wait and see as to when or how it happens.
Good idea.
Item would be if there's any engineering update that
Nothing this evening.
they can.
Well, question on the previous about the ADA ramps and the sort of missing phantom crosswalks. Is the intersection up at Ardmore and I believe it's Newport? also one in that situation? Were you thinking of that one as well?
That one has come under discussion previously. I asked for a traffic study. Because of funding right now, we're moving that to the next fiscal year. But I believe that would warrant a traffic light for two reasons. One, it's a lot of cars trying to get out of there. It's very difficult to see traffic coming that's going westbound. And it would actually help with traffic, slowing the traffic down on Ardmore Boulevard.
Well, specifically, as I think it has the same state installed new like ADA ramps to nowhere in the
Yes,
middle. I was just wanting to clarify that's what
Yeah.
you were talking about. too.
Yeah,
Okay.
again, they said, we want to put markings on there, we can, and that would be like luring people to their death. Yeah.
Agreed.
That concludes public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Bayoki. Next, we have Ops and Policy. Mr. Lawrence, please.
Manager has an update? I do. I actually have a couple. First, my report is attached. If there's any questions, we can take those at any point before I'm done. Second, this one came in new as of 4:07 this afternoon. It possibly could have gone under borough property, could also go under finance. I believe I'd mentioned at last week's meeting that had sought some advice as far as our ability and what would be the best financial option as far as potentially purchasing the solar panels on this building at 4400 Greensburg. And Wilson Engineering, who's providing our consulting, did get back to me, and based on their calculations, they gave us three options that they ran the numbers on. One, if we just wait through the entire 2042. Two, if we buy out in 2025, which would be a 2026 effective, that we would stop paying the PPA, or if we waited until 2030. Financially, the best option, as I had estimated, is that we buy it out in 2025. They did calculations, which I'm happy to send out to everyone. But if we do that and then take the energy credits for the life of the system, they're estimating a total cost of $278,000, which includes $286,000 if you include all the proposed maintenance, versus a $591,000 if we left it as is. So it's very similar to the numbers that I had presented in the proposed budget. So I will be continuing with that recommendation in the next draft of the budget. The other piece is a memo that I included. I've been discussing this with President Martin, and it involves the changing the current structure of the committee meetings and potentially moving away from the two council of the whole meetings and moving towards the more standard. The majority of municipalities do it, where committee meetings are held separately, potentially different days, different times, much like our advisory council meetings are. Usually those end up with a council of 7. Those end up with 3 members on the committee meeting, and then it's scheduled and you meet with the appropriate staff or subject matter experts. It's a little bit easier to bat ideas around. One of the things, and not that we don't want to be transparent, but sometimes you come up with at least I come up with a harebrained idea that I want to bat around. And if it's said in public, sometimes that can be taken as being it's going to happen. And those just tend to inhibit some thought. And I think we are a progressive enough group that we want to bat around some crazy ideas and see if something sparks an idea. So that's something that I think President Martin and I are interested in seeing if the group wants to move forward. President Martin, do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Abrams. I like the idea of this. In effect, it's kind of what's happening now with the Finance Committee that Mr. Watkins and Mr. Erbeldinger meet. And then you have a solid package to present. Now, finances is pretty complicated, but I find when it's committee of the whole, we're all kind of expected to do a little bit of homework. So we come to the meeting to discuss this with an idea. And it's very hard time-wise. I would like to move this way again, starting in the new year. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Just not really, I can't get my head around what the structure would look like. I see in your memo here that it would be 2 large meetings a month, so that would include
Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
that would include an agenda setting meeting and then our business meeting. But then, so where do these committee meetings fit in and how does that flow?
Usually, they fit in wherever is convenient. One of the factors on the committee meetings is because we're not meeting as a quorum, they don't have to be held public, even if we do make them public, there are no laws stating when they need to be. So if it's convenient for the committee members, like finance, we meet at noon on the last Friday of the month. It happens to work out because Mr. Erbeldinger, Mr. Watkins are both available, as well as myself and Allison as the treasurer. So the 4 of us can meet, and President Martin when she's available, and dig into this stuff. So whether it makes sense to meet during business hours or off hours, and that's why when I say the pros and cons, one of the cons is it could take more time for an individual person. Mr. Erbeldinger?
Yeah, if I did the math right, we used to have this kind of committee structure, but it was a public meeting. So every member of council is automatically member of 3 committees. So you have a chair, a vice chair, and a regular member. So every member of council is a chair of one committee, vice chair of another, and a member of another. So I guess if we get rid of one of those committee of the whole meetings and have an agenda meeting, you would have physically 3 committee meetings and 2 public meetings, so 5. So it would go up from 3 to 5.
The other piece that could factor in, again, this is all dependent on what council wants to do, is like any of the advisory councils, if for some reason there is no item to discuss for that month, the meeting can easily be canceled. Again, you've got the administrative advantage of they don't have to be posted, advertised in the newspaper. Usually I would have them posted on the calendar anyway, just because we're having them, but you don't have the legal aspects of having to go through the full advertising process and the full cancellation process. So it's easier to move them if needed. Again, it's been the standard, and as the administrative staff, I found it to be more productive on my end to be able to kind of dig into some issues and not be either worried that, we know that we have maybe an hour that we've set aside, but not be worried that, oh wait, we still got 8 more or 3 more committee meetings to kind of get through. So it allows for better movement.
I have a legal question, because in the past, when we did that kind of structure, the president of council is automatically a member of every single committee. So if the president of council shows up to a meeting, then we have suddenly 4 members of council in a non-public meeting. How would that work? Because in the past, we had it, so it was fine.
There are how many members? So you could not have a 4th member of council come, because then there would be a quorum, and then you would have a Sunshine Act violation. So any meeting where you have a quorum, you have to publicly advertise, post. You have to have meeting minutes, an agenda that was posted, and so that couldn't happen. So you would need to schedule appropriately, so that way if you knew council president was coming, then you'd have someone sit out that meeting. It kind of just takes
If you knew that there's something larger that, then as long as there's time to advertise, we could advertise.
But in the past, it was no problem. You know, literally in the past, for the people, newer people, we literally did like musical chairs. We had like finance committee, so the finance member came on that table in the old building, and all the previous committee people went back. So they were sitting in the audience, and they were allowed to ask questions, but they were not part of the committee.
It's a good point too, what you said with advertising. If you did want to have a quorum at a specific meeting, it would be a special meeting, so you would only need 24 hours notice ahead of time. So it's a lot easier to get a notice in the paper. It really cuts down on you can have a shorter turnaround between scheduling the meeting versus.
And Mr. Erbaldinger, as you said, what used to happen, even though they were public, it was fine. Especially with the updated sunshine law, we would not be able to do that. Just because you're sitting on the other side of the dais doesn't exclude you. You're part of the quorum no matter where you are.
And as a history lesson, you know, COVID happened, and then we were all on Zoom. And on Zoom, pretty much everyone has the same. It was hard to distinguish between, hey, you're not member of that committee, you can't talk. You know, that's why we kind of started that committee of the whole during COVID, because we had all those Zoom meetings. But before, we literally were pretty, we followed the rules. We kind of swapped every committee we had before. Some council members, they knew, let's say, finance is first, and I'm not member of finance, so they showed up later on purpose, you know, because they didn't have to be there. Work for you to do some homework, I think.
We currently almost follow that same model now. Seems like you're introducing 3 more meetings. It's just my opinion. So right now you have 2 committees and an agenda, like a regular business meeting. But if individual members of a committee, so for instance, finance wants to kind of huddle with you and some of the stakeholders, it just happens in an impromptu kind of manner right now. I do understand the downside of that, which is you might have to repeat the same thing several times, right? If not everybody's heard that conversation. I don't know. I kind of see it happening already kind of organically. Do you just want to formalize what's going on there, or? Am I making
Unfortunately,
sense, or?
no, as I put in my memo, I don't think it's at all intentional, but I don't think it is happening.
Okay.
There's a lot of, with only 2 people, I think sometimes just a phone call or a conversation occurs just between council members, and it doesn't always necessarily come up that I know what's going on, that other people, where we might have some advanced input, and then things come to the table here. So this way, I think it helps put together a better package when it comes time for it to go in front of council for discussion either, and to ask questions and deliberation during what would be then the agenda meeting and or the business meeting. I think we spend more time than we probably should debating amongst the 7 council members, mayor, chief, myself, whoever might be involved, versus putting it together in a slightly neater package where we can have all the questions answered ahead of time.
Yes, I agree. I was actually never in favor of doing it this way, the way we've been doing it. To me, it's not really a committee. It's just, I don't want to say it's a free-for-all, but it can work out that way. And it's not very effective, and it's not very efficient not to have a committee that's just focusing on those agenda items or those items for that particular committee. As you said, you can flesh out the ideas, you can come up with a more robust proposal, and then present that to council. The way it is now, it's sort of like we talk about certain things, and then we have to let it go month after month after month until we actually accumulate enough information to move something forward.
I mean, it says advantages with the current system is it's more efficient, because under the old system, we had like public safety, for example, saying the 3 members, we need a new police car. Then you had to go to finance. So the 3 finance members had to say, okay, we will pay for a new police car. And then you went to council for a full meeting. And sometimes it was like way early. It was actually hostile, like public safety voted down 2-1, one member. So that member brought it back up on a business meeting as new or old business. Even like it maybe reduces the discussion on the committee, but right now we have very streamlined business meetings because everything is already discussed in the committees. So if we have 3-member committees, and 4 people don't participate, those 4 people probably will have asked questions during the business meeting. So I haven't made up my mind, but the efficiency with that system is
Yeah.
definitely there.
In business and in other organizations, this kind of way of doing business would never work. It just wouldn't work.
If I can add one other piece, and again, from my experience, and I haven't been able to do this because of the structure we have. It just hasn't made sense, I should say. Whenever, especially if I'm part of that committee meeting and there's a proposal that comes up, I usually end up writing up some type of pro forma ahead of time that would be included as part of the packet. You know, what is the entire logic behind a police car? What is the cost? So that, and trying to answer all those questions ahead of time that we normally don't have. That the format has never fully allowed for it unless there's a separate memo attached. So a lot of that stuff would be hopefully fleshed out ahead of time and would be passed between, committees depending. It doesn't need to be super formal like you see in federal and state government, that it must pass this number of people to move out of this group. No, there's nothing stating that if it's a committee of 3, that 2 need to pass it to move it to another committee or to move it to committee of the whole or to the agenda meeting. It just does help to bring support. And this also helps if you're at all concerned that there may not be a second for a motion. If you've got it in committee and it's passed through, 2 folks on, you at least know you have a motion and a second to bring debate to the floor.
Question, I'm a little lost myself. So the committees come up with the recommendations for activity. When will the council as a group hear those recommendations?
Generally be in the agenda setting, in the, what's called the agenda meeting.
Formal business meeting.
Right.
Okay.
And then, the formal business meeting would stay very similar to what it is, where it's going through the motions.
The agenda meeting would be on the 2nd.
However, it
Or
would be
whatever,
structured. Yeah, it would be prior to, 1 or 2 weeks prior to. And then we could actually also remove the reports piece of the business meeting because we'll have done all of that in one session.
It's almost functioning a little bit as the cow does now.
Yes, very much so.
All right, I think to Frank's question, I think it is formalizing what we're not doing. Have some merits in on that one. It's a little new to me. I know, Seth, you and I talked about this. I certainly have no problems going forward with this. I think nothing's going to be perfect. I think it's worth considering and looking at for the coming year. I don't think there's anything here that the ship is going to go under if we do it. And I will say that the way we had it before with 3 members of committee, those 3 people, like you do in the federal and state level, the whole purpose of the committee is to have a few elected members knowledgeable about their one particular area, and then they figure, you guys deal with finance, we can't. And I think that worked better. I think there's a little bit too much now when we meet as a group of 7 on each topic. I cannot or don't even care to follow every dang thing. That's why we have 7 people in this council. And I like the notion of committees being expert in their particular field, and we, to some degree, not totally, but to some degree, respect their knowledge and their recommendations. Now, of course, it will sift through us, and we may say it's not going to fly. But I'm in support of this. How would you folks like to go through with it? Would you like to consider tonight, make a decision to consider this for June or January, Mr. Bacon?
I have just one sort of scheduling and feasibility question. I think it's a Mr. Abrams question. For example, Public Works or Borough Property where we have like Mr. Brett or someone from a professional services standpoint. And just the scheduling of all of that along with people's availability with day jobs and things like that. I just want to make sure we're not potentially opening up like extra costs or extra scheduling difficulties on the professional services side of this.
My recommendation would be, again, it's different than what we've done, is that we modify the engineer's role a little bit to not necessarily be spread as far across and have little pieces in each. And you do something more similar to what I do with my manager's report. I try and consolidate everything I've done into one report, which they give us in the written report, but not necessarily a read out for each subgroup. Maybe it continues to be split out somewhat in the written report. If we know there are questions and we can have, we can work through with Mr. Brett and the LSSE staff when it might be appropriate for them to be at the committee meetings, or just have them regularly at the agenda setting meeting to answer any follow-up questions. And then again, either at or not at the voting meeting. So I've had it work quite efficiently where either the engineer or the solicitor is not necessarily at every meeting.
Just to clarify, the agenda setting meeting would be still a committee of the whole. So if we have,
Yes.
let's say, I don't know, Borough Property, we talk about, Borough Property Committee is recommending to paint the pool pink, then the whole of council can discuss about that.
Correct. That's the point.
Even the business meeting still kind of decluttered because the agenda setting is all happening.
Exactly. Right now, we have a lot of discussion happening during two meetings. This way, during the agenda meeting, council of the whole, the committee would present a more formalized plan, proposal, discussion point, and then council members would have an opportunity ahead of time to read through it and then come with questions and have that floor debate as to whether or not you have questions or disagree. And then you could vote. Then you would decide to move it either forward to the voting meeting or move back to committee.
We could even do these on Zoom if we needed to, couldn't we? I mean,
Yes.
not preferred, but
Yeah, not necessarily preferred because I personally have grown to like face-to-face meetings, especially if I don't need to travel a whole lot for them. But yes, they absolutely could be Zoom or hybrid, depending, and again, thinking about how the engineer or the solicitor may participate if needed.
Air is part of that overall count. Voting member, would he be allowed to be at committee meetings? Because in the past, he was allowed to be there.
Yeah, the mayor doesn't count towards the quorum, so the mayor could be present at any committee meeting he chooses.
Anyone else? Proposal to move forward, thoughts?
I feel like we are rushing it a little bit.
Here's a thought. I think, how much time have we spent on this?
right,
How much time have we spent on this?
right.
Okay. If we did it the other way, we can wait till December, that's fine. But this is probably an example, had we done it the other way that we're proposing, the committee would have come to you with a full explanation that would have answered the questions before you had to ask them. So it could have been a 7-minute presentation and we would have, anticipated a lot of these things and it could have slowed it down or could have sped this up a little bit. So sitting here watching this makes me think there is some merit to this. That said, we got a month and a half. You want to push it to ops and policies in December? You guys have some time to think about it and then we'll make a decision. You prefer the wait? Yeah?
I'm comfortable committing to going to it tonight.
I'm in favor of it.
I am as well.
Madam President?
I'm in favor of it.
Well, I am too. So let's say we go for it. It's not the end of the world. If it doesn't work next year, we can December, we can say, hey, let's tweak this a little bit.
You have to have the president pick the third committee.
Yes, somebody has a responsibility there.
I'm on it then. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Anything else from the borough manager?
Just as a action item on my end, Madam President, once you have the third person chosen and I guess they've agreed to it, although they don't have to, if you could let me know, because I will then reach out to each committee to look at what best times might work based on people's work schedules, whether they're daylight, evenings. And I do realize that depending on what's going on and what my involvement may be, that I have just committed myself to a lot more evenings as well. So I did not take this lightly as we were discussing it.
I'll get something to you right away, Mr. Abrams. Thanks.
Anything else? Okay, great.
That's all I have.
I think I only have three things. The borough council or borough calendar that's ready to go. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I have one question for the monthly report from Mr. Abrams. Under the page 2 operations. The first item. Is that correct, or?
That was a miss on doing a type over, copy and paste.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, no, I apologize on that.
The borough calendar's ready?
Oh, calendar, well, it depends on whether or not we move forward with changing the committee structure.
Oh, sorry. You know, I could have stayed at home tonight. What do you want to do about it? You want to just?
So I can tell everyone that right now, the borough calendar, I do have it drafted. It is almost identical to what it has been. The only shift I made is there are a couple where it's the meetings on the very beginning of the month where I tried to move it maybe back from Tuesday to Thursday, just to give us a couple of days to finish out the month and be able to report accurately. But otherwise, everything more or less stayed the same. The advisory councils are in there. I'm still waiting on Arts and Culture Advisory to give me their specific dates. They know when they have a draft of the calendar, so they know what dates are available for them to set a regular meeting. Again, depending on the speed, which sounds like it'll be quite speedy, President Martin gets the third committee member chosen, we can reach out and I can have that calendar modified as quickly as people get back to me and have a draft at any of the committee meetings or any business meeting once we have that.
Okay, if you please go ahead and do that and feel free to put a deadline. If nobody makes a peep about it, it's what's going and that's it. One of the reasons it's not as big a deal as years ago before we had Zoom, if people had a travel commitment or something, we actually tried to accommodate the calendar. But with Zoom being permitted now, asking for everyone's input is probably not necessary. The Citizen of the Year Award, we only had one nomination. So I guess that will go forward for a vote in the upcoming business meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Abrams?
Yes, that is my understanding.
Was there a deadline for this nomination? It's first I'm hearing about it. So.
I think it was around mid-October. You go on the website, it's there.
Yeah, everything was posted to the website. There was a deadline indicated there. There was a link to the page, which also had some criteria and the application.
I want to say it was January to September, so it's a very large open nomination period.
It closed October. I don't remember.
I think yes.
Mid-October, yeah.
Mr. Bacon?
Yeah.
Just for sort of procedural and showmanship thing here, are we specifically avoiding mentioning the nominee's name in all of that? Okay, I assume so, wanted to be clear on that. Okay. So not publicly stating.
The nominee is.
The nominee is going forward, et cetera. Okay, thank you.
Price Waterhouse has that. They'll let us know that night.
Funny to discuss why someone should and should not be the Citizen of the Year.
Well, normally we would have had to push this to executive session, but this, no one was going to say no on it, so we'll go.
Well,
for it.
actually, it wouldn't be an appropriate item for executive session.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
No, it
It
wouldn't be
wouldn't meet the
executive,
criteria, yeah.
but it could be a deliberation that could be had, not under executive, but not necessarily under public. This would be an appropriate email discussion item.
Not a quorum.
Yes. Basting the public is not really a good political move. At least in public. Okay. Okay, the other last thing, I think it's the last thing on the agenda. We did come up with that problem, the issue, about a month and a half ago about the permission to park in the pool lodge. And we put it off to tonight. I'm going to make a suggestion here, but before I get to my suggestion, I may repeat myself a little bit from last time, but when it first came up, it looked like it was a bit of a toggle switch. We do allow it or we don't allow it. And with a little bit of thought, there's quite a continuum of possible options to addressing this issue. It is not that simple. It's easy to want to go to the yes or no thing because we've got upset residents. We have an ordinance that seemingly says we shouldn't do it. But I think there's a continuum of possibilities to approach an answer that might kind of satisfy both sides, but that's quite a mess and it's going to take some time to get into. But unfortunately, there's an ordinance undergirding this whole discussion that it goes back to 1992, I think, and the borough manager sent me a copy, and it's vague, it's imprecise, and I think the only answer to figuring it out is the law of Chardonnay, to be honest. I think before we can necessarily even address the questions that come up with the pool lot, and if we address that, I think it brings some other issues up. And the other point is that any decision we make, enforcing it is going to fall on one small group, none of them making the decision. And I think they should have significant input in this. So I'm not sure our traditional sitting around in the seven of us is talking. But to get back to the ordinance, I think reviewing the present ordinance and evaluating whether it needs revision is somewhat complex and should involve the solicitor and a few people who have the time and energy to really dig deep on it before and then discuss how they want to revise the ordinance and then overlay that with a decision regarding parking. Perhaps beyond just the pool lodge, but some of our rules about parking in the borough. Because there are at least, I think I count 10 in this room who would have an input in the discussion, that's too much. So, and I won't take credit for this or blame for it. The borough manager suggested that we form a smaller ad hoc help the solicitor to evaluate the ordinances and then overlay that with an evaluation of solution to the problem, or perhaps a few solutions to the problem, and back to the council with their recommendation. I would consider an ad hoc committee of borough manager, a member of council, or you can make it up to 5, total of 5 with 3 members. Even if we do that as an ad hoc committee, we don't violate the Sunshine Act.
If you're saying you'd have 3 total members of council?
If we did 3, we're not. If we have
3,
5,
yeah, 3 is not a quorum, so that would be okay. You can have 5 total members if one is the chief and one's borough manager, but you can't have
that's
more, you can't have 4 members of council.
what I thought. So we would have 5, so you could nominate 3 people. I would recommend we go that route. You would call it an ad hoc committee, call it an expert committee. Spend the time, and this is not a committee that's going to have to figure something out in 3 weeks. We are under no deadlines whatsoever for this. It's a complex issue. We got people who are busy. It can go several months. It can go as long as they feel they need to dig into the problem. So would anybody like to the basic idea here? Expert recommendation sometime in springtime.
I support that, Jack.
I also support.
I support it as well.
Sure,
I'm supportive of it. I'm not sure if I'm on that committee, but I did some research, talking to people. Basically, one of the reasons for that overnight parking restriction, I'm not just talking about the pool, I'm talking in general, is Chief told me that actually is that we know who is parked there. You know, like if we know like some stranger car, because we have no overnight parking, if there's some car parked on some road overnight, they run the tag and they see that's maybe some stranger. We need to look into it. And a police officer actually suggested as a compromise to address that we know who is parking there, we could issue some kind of like Edgewood does, like some 20, like doesn't need to make lots of money, just maybe to cover our costs, a $20 permit per year so people can park. And I talked to a few families who have like that 3-car situation, but narrow driveways, so the kids have to shuffle around and then the kids get attacked because they forget the car to put it in. So those families would be actually in favor of that. So whoever is in that committee, I just want like to put that out as a compromise.
I think that brings up an example. Wait, the more you think about this, the more options. That's one. So we have the borough manager, the chief of police. Somebody's got to make a suggestion here. Borough property, public safety and ops and policies would seem to be the logical source of committee.
I agree with
Yes.
that.
These Mr. Bacon suggestions.
I'd say I'd be perfectly willing to contribute as a committee member. I also just wanted to ask if this is something where that committee could have like public comment meetings, or what sort of, if there's any restrictions on that, or if that's pretty much open season of, hey, everybody on this street, come on by, you know, tonight and we'll have a session.
So any committee meetings you have, you can hold open to the public. They just won't be governed by the Sunshine Act, so we won't have to meet the legal requirements of the Sunshine Act. But that doesn't keep you from hosting any meeting here at the Borough Building, as long as you've less than a quorum, inviting members of the public, whether it be specific areas of the public or the public in general, and taking comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it was something I forgot to bring up. That's one of the things I would expect this committee would do. And it's a lot easier for them to do than for us to have this formal meeting. We invite people and 3 people show up and then they say, we didn't get involved. With 5 of you can schedule more little meetings. You can do what you want. Any other thoughts, Mr. Mayor?
Also happy to serve on that committee. I have a lot of, I guess the word would be context for the parking situation in the borough, the history of some of the decisions that were made with regard to parking ordinances we have now. So happy to serve on that committee. And I don't think it violates any sort of sunshine policy. So
Do you want to throw in your 2 cents here?
So far, I'm all in favor, and I'm not looking to exclude anyone. And this group isn't going to necessarily vote, so having 6 people isn't really an issue, as long as everyone's good with that. Otherwise,
Okay.
potentially have an elected drop off if you want to keep it lower, but no, it looks good to me. I look forward to actually digging in and kind of giving a show of what a committee meeting smaller can do and provide a productive response.
Just to clarify, scope will be to look at all overnight parking restrictions, not just the pool parking lot. Okay.
The entire parking, all these ordinances, because you could, the one we have it would make you weep.
I mean, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Woodside has majority is no overnight. There's one block where they allow it magically.
In bourbon, I enjoy reading ordinances, and these have made me cry.
Anybody else? So I guess we'll take a member of the ops and policies, the public safety, and the borough property committees. I think we can, is there anything else under my agenda that I'm missing?
I do not believe so, sir.
Thank you very much. I think that's it, unless somebody has anything else to bring up. Mr. Erblinger?
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Next, we have planning and zoning. Mr. DeCosta, please.
As usual, there's not really much on the agenda, but I do have some news. I urge, the committee hasn't been meeting much lately because they haven't had much to discuss. I urge them to call a special meeting that we could start discussing some of our goals here with the comprehensive plan. So that will be on Monday, the 9th or 18th, I think that is. Is that right? Is Monday the 18th? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but in any case, we're having a committee meeting with the members of that committee, and Marcus, if you could make it, that would be great too. If you could make it, that would be
I
great.
actually
too.
not.
You're not
No,
available.
I'm not in town that day.
Okay, okay. So hopefully that'll bring up some points of discussion for us to move forward with planning and zoning. Otherwise, I don't have anything else to report.
Thank you. Next, we have the committee of the whole managers update.
Do not believe I have an update for this committee. I can't find my page. Yep, thank you. Code enforcement, via email, I sent out the code enforcement report. This month it's 30 pages because and I opted not to print it out for everyone. Does go into detail, other than to say that
God.
had a still having regular conversations with Alex and with Carl and Mike, the code enforcement officers, as well as with the staff at the COG. Everyone seems to be getting a better handle just on our ordinances and our expectations. So I'm pleased, and just going to reiterate, as I reported at the budget meeting last week, the costs came in significantly lower than I had been budgeting, just because by spreading the cost as a group, we're coming in with quite a savings. And the zoning report, all they've really been doing is some very basic permits, and those come in with the billing.
Thank you. Next, we have solicitors report.
I have no public report tonight.
And we have no executive session planned for tonight either.
No, there will be some items for next week's executive.
I don't think we moved any issues from the other committees since we all met tonight. Anyway, Environmental Advisory Council, I don't think there's anything.
I don't believe so. They've just, in emails that I've had with them, they're just working on planning their additional events and making sure they've got room booked.
Any comments? Anyone? Anything missing? All right, that concludes our meeting for tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.